Welcome to Creative Moves, Left Career, Right Path. My name's Kabir and today I'm joined by Manish Chauhan, a qualified lawyer specialised in finance, specifically derivatives. Also a writer, he has his first book being released by the publisher Faber in January 2026. Manish, it's great to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So basically, how we like to start the show is if you could just talk us through your journey from when you left school into becoming a lawyer, and then we'll move on to what you're doing and planning to do after that.
Yeah, so I'm from Leicester. So I went to school there, I went to college, and I studied for my A-levels, art, psychology, English.
Right.
And business. So I did those, and then I applied for law. For university to read law at university. I went to the University of Hertfordshire.
Okay.
At the time, the law faculty was based in St Albans, so I spent 3 years of my life there basically, and not really in Hatfield, which is where the main campus was.
Right.
So yeah, that was that's what I did at the time.
Had you always wanted to had an interest in law, or?
No, I think what happened to me was that I didn't really appreciate that one could be a creative as a job.
Right.
So I think the kind of culture I come from, all of my peers at the time were all sort of very high achieving, wanting to be doctors, wanting to be engineers, accountants. And those were the kind of career paths that were kind of open to us, or at least I perceived those were the only ones to be open to us, even though I myself was a very creative person. I loved doing art, I loved painting, and actually during my time at university I sold quite a lot of paintings, but it just never really occurred to me that this could be a career.
Right.
And so at the time of picking my A-levels, I was sort of thinking, well, of these limited options, what would be the one that best suits me? I was not into science, I was not into maths, so I picked something that was more kind of closer to my interests, and so I picked law.
Right.
And so it was only really later on. So if I kind of talk about it in a kind of chronological sense, then I went to university. I did my law degree, my LLB, and it was during the final year of that LLB that I read an article which was talking about Oxford University opening up its creative writing academy. And I read this article, and I'd been writing since I was 16, so that was something I did. Right. But I just didn't, again, envisage that it could be something more than a hobby.
And when you were writing from that age, were you writing short stories? Were you writing novels, or what you wanted to be a novel? What sort of content were you writing?
So initially it was short pieces, short stories. And then I started doing, when I was 16 or 17, I went to the Leicester writing. There was like a group of Leicester writers, and every week they met in the adult education college in town, and they had like an open mic session, and it had been going for years. This is a really like established writing community. So you go there, you put your name down if you want to read, you then get up on stage and read your piece, and then everybody puts their hand up and tells you what they think of it. Wow. Or rather what they thought it could, how it could be made better.
It, yeah.
Exactly.
How many people?
Oh, like a lot. I would say sometimes it was kind of like 30,
right.
30, 40.
And all different ages, I imagine.
I think it was, at that time, I was the youngest, one of the youngest. It was mostly slightly older people.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I think that's quite an intimidating environment to go into as a 16-year-old.
So I did find it, and I still find it very hard to read my work in front of a large crowd. But at the time, I think when you're younger, you also have this kind of confidence in your own ability. At least I definitely had a confidence in my writing, which I think was born of ignorance. Like, I think young people do tend to be confident about the things they're doing, and especially writers don't have any real understanding of what is good until they pursue it for many years and begin to understand actually the gap between what you think is good versus what is good begins to show itself and become. Right. And if you write more, it becomes smaller. That gap does. I've been writing since I was 16. I was doing short stories, and then I went to a short story course. I did like another course on the side, like a novel writing course. And I went with an idea for a novel. And the lady running it, this is when I was 17, I told her that I wanted to write this novel. And she said, you have to have lived before you can write a novel. And I was really offended by her because I thought, oh, she doesn't know anything about me. How can she make that assumption? But of course, now I can look back and say she was 100% right, because I don't think you can write a novel until you have experience of living and until you've met enough people and seen sort of enough complexities in humans in order to be able to like depict those on the page. I had an idea at that time. My writing at the time was very kind of descriptive and very floral. It was almost plotless, is how I'd probably describe it. But at that time, during those courses, I met somebody who has become my mentor and who really saw in me something that I couldn't really see in myself. But rather than try to sort of like turn me into her type of writer, she just gave me the time to just like experiment and just write what I was writing, and then to kind of allowed me my own journey, I suppose.
Right.
So the writing was happening very much it was very much a thing in my life. And then, so when I read about the Oxford Academy opening, I thought to myself, well, that would be amazing to go into that.
But and how old were you at this point?
So I would have been 19, 20.
Right, so you were at uni?
Yeah, my last year, my final year at university. Yeah. And I knew, because of the way my legal career was kind of set out, it was going to be a case of I'd have a couple of years to spare before I started a job, because I hadn't got a training contract lined up. Usually if you do, then the law firm will pay for your kind of post LLB courses.
So can you just explain to those of us that don't work in law then?
So when I did it, and now it's changing again, but when I did it, you either do your LLB, so you have your bachelor's is in law.
Is that what LLB stands for?
Yes, that's the qualification.
Right.
Or you can do any other degree you want, and then you can either convert to kind of get the legal qualification by doing what was known as a GDL. Or you can do...
And what does GDL stand for?
GDL is the Graduate Law Diploma.
Oh,
Diploma in Law.
Right.
Yeah. And so that gives you the kind of basic modules you need. And then if you haven't got... So that's a kind of conversion course, they call it.
Sure.
Then you can decide to be either a barrister or a solicitor, and you would do either the legal practice course, which is what I did, to become a solicitor, or the bar vocational course, which is to become a barrister. So I wanted to be a solicitor, but I went to a university which wasn't really the best known for law. It was kind of it produced a lot of high street lawyers, essentially. But because I'd chosen to do law, I was also very sort of like an ambitious person, but I really wanted to kind of get to become the best lawyer, or become a lawyer in the city.
But you mentioned something before though, where you said you didn't have something in place when you finished. That's what I was interested to know what that was.
So usually if you're at university in your final year, you apply for a job in a law firm. In order to finish your qualification off, to qualify as a lawyer, you need to either do 2 years in a law firm, which is called a training contract, or you do 1 year pupillage, which is as a barrister. And then after that, you're qualified, and then you can sort of like work in that capacity. So when you apply for a training contract, usually you apply when you're in your final year, and if you get one, they then pay for your GDL, your LPC. And so they kind of pay for those courses. But because I didn't have a job lined up, I had to pay for them myself.
Right.
And so that was fine, but it meant that I knew there'd be some time between that and me applying, because you're usually applying in advance, 2 years in advance of the job starting. So I knew that I'd have a couple of years.
Why did you wait? Did you not look for that training?
Oh yes, I was looking. It was very competitive.
Right. Okay.
Oh yeah. So I was getting interviews, but I wasn't getting beyond that. Then I had
I wondered if it was because you weren't looking that it didn't happen, but.
Oh no, I was looking. I was looking, but it was just really competitive. And because I went to university, which wasn't one of the top ones,
of course,
even though I had grades, it just became very competitive. But I was very also, by the same token, I was very sort of like firm that I was going to get there. So I was constantly applying and constantly like improving the applications. So when I saw about the creative writing course, I thought to myself, well, there might be an opportunity to apply for that. So I finished my degree, I finished my LPC, and it was during that year that I applied to Oxford, and also applied to law firms. So I was doing it all at the same time. And then I got interviewed at Oxford. I got onto the course, which really surprised me because I'd actually applied to go to Oxford as an undergrad to do law and been rejected. And fully, I can see why that would have been because I was not prepared. I didn't come from that kind of background, so I wasn't really like in that kind of circle.
What college ran the creative writing course?
Kellogg.
Right.
So it was like, I think it was the newest college.
Right.
And it was for all the postgrads.
Right.
Yeah. So I applied, got that, and then a week later, I got an offer from the law firm saying, here's a training contract if you want it, but can you start earlier?
Right.
Rather than, because I'd applied imagining it'd be 2 years later, can you start immediately
And
this
how long was
year?
the writing course?
That was a 2-year part-time.
Oh my God. So it must have been a massive conflict.
It was a conflict. It was a conflict, but I knew that I wouldn't let the creative writing thing go. And so I explained to them that I wanted to spend some time getting some legal experience because I had to fund the masters myself. So I had to work in London, and I was working in London, and then everything I earned would go towards paying for the masters. The masters was 2 years part-time because it was a kind of a clustered learning format. So you would go once a term for like an intensive week where you have all your lectures and everything. And then in the space between that, you can be wherever you are and you're finishing your creative project, your critical project, whatever it is. So my law firm that I was going to train with, they were okay with it. They said, fine, you can start.
Wow, amazing.
At the time it was the time of the financial crash.
Yeah.
So a lot of trainees were being sort of asked to defer their training contract.
Right, so it suited both of you.
Yes.
Right.
So there was a bit of that opportunity as well. So then it kind of worked out at that time that I could do both of these things.
Yeah.
So I did my master's.
Kept your parents happy?
Yes. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. And so I went to Oxford, did that. At the same time, I was working in London, and I was working as dealing with complaints against solicitors, working for like an ombudsman.
Right.
So that was like a kind of an easy.
Is that the SRA?
Sort of, linked to that.
Right.
It was called the Legal Complaint Service at the time, which was sitting within the SRA. I worked for them, and that was a kind of an easy job in terms of hours and stuff, so that enabled me to do my assignments. But it was really going to Oxford that made me realise that people are actually writers as a career.
Right.
People are earning money that way. People are they're teaching writing, they're writing themselves, they're publishing books, they've all these winning prizes, whatever it is.
Yeah. There's an opportunity as a job.
Yes. So that was my first real understanding. And so for me, those 2 years really represented somebody opening a door for me. And it was almost like somebody gave me a cake and they said, here, have this cake. You don't have to give any of it back to us. Eat it, enjoy whatever you want. And so I felt very lucky to have had that opportunity because it enabled me to kind of really explore writing and writing with people who were very intelligent, very diverse, intelligent, and so very engaged. And it was also my first ever experience really of working in a small classroom. At university where I was, you'd have like 100 people in your lecture. Here, the whole year comprised about 14 people.
Right.
Like it was nothing that kind of it felt very luxurious to me.
And did you have a sort of were you in contact with each other when you weren't studying for that week or that intense period?
Yeah, no, we were definitely.
You had a community.
Yeah, there was a community. So we all sort of got along, and there were and so it was nice to see people once a term when we met. It was quite a good setup. So that was my kind of introduction into like that other career.
Yeah.
Which before then I hadn't really
imagined. Was forming, yeah.
So I did the masters, then I finished the masters, and then I started my training contract, and that was when the writing stopped. Yeah. Because my hours were really long.
I was going to say, how intense was the workload?
Yeah, it was very intense.
Right.
I mean, it was super intense. It was like my first seat was finance, which was it was known for its bad hours. I had really the hours were not good. There was a time when I was thinking, well, if I can leave work before 9, that still gives me 3 hours to do things. I can see a film, I can go to dinner.
Wow.
So you're kind of like
every day.
Almost, so your perception of what actually is reality changes.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really I hadn't imagined that would be the case.
How big was the firm you were training at?
It was an American firm, and I was working in the London office. It was big. Right. It was pretty big, yeah.
And so when you say finance, what is that, like contracts for
So
M&A, like mergers and acquisition, or any kind of finance, or
so it was so mergers and acquisitions would be under the corporate department.
right?
The buying and sort of selling of companies. I was working in finance, helping people like do some trading, or it could be like raising money for something, or
Right.
loans, things like this.
Right.
Securitization, like project finance, like the kind of the finance element of bigger transactions. But ours was a full service department, so it wasn't as if like I was specializing from the get go. Especially as a trainee, you're encouraged to kind of do work for lots of different people, which means that you're building a more of a solid base. So at that point, I was trying my hand at everything, even though I was sitting with a partner who specialized in capital markets, but it wasn't just his work that I was doing. I was kind of doing different things as and when they...
And did you enjoy it?
They came. I did enjoy it. But I knew even from that point that I wasn't like a career lawyer.
Right.
Like I didn't have any ambitions to be a partner. I was just there to kind of, I suppose, like fulfill the thing that I had said I would do.
Yeah.
And so I'm a conscientious person and I work hard.
Yeah.
But it was never a passion for me. Like now, after all these years, I can see other people who are lawyers and I see that they're very natural lawyers.
Yeah.
They're very motivated lawyers. That was never me.
How many people were in the training cohort that when you were there? And were you like a friendship group?
Yeah, we were like a friendship group.
Yeah, so the reason I asked, because I'm interested to know how, presumably they were all career lawyers in their minds. And so when you were out socializing at 9 o'clock or whenever you got off work and people were talking about planning for the future, I just wondered for you, knowing that you had this other plan, how that worked in terms of sort of like connecting with, we're like, yeah, great, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And you're like, actually, I don't think I am.
Well, actually, I thought what was interesting, there were probably about, in our intake, there probably were about 15, 16 people.
Right.
In my particular cohort, I would say. Because it was so competitive to get there, there was definitely a sense that when you started a training contract, you had to be grateful that you got there, that you were there, and you had to almost like prove that...
Demonstrate that you were worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there was definitely that element, but I was never hiding the fact that I liked writing. That was very much something that I did on the side, and I spoke about it.
Right.
There, even during that period. I remember having a conversation with somebody who very much was a career lawyer, and who said to me, who basically said something like, we were talking about going for some opportunity within the law firm, and she said, oh, but it doesn't really matter for you because you don't really want this.
Right.
And so I think that there was a perception that actually perhaps people wanted it more than I did, even though I would say at that time that was not true. I was in the training contract, I was in a law firm, and I was going to qualify there. What happens after that, I wasn't really thinking about necessarily. All I knew was that I had other interests. But yeah, there was definitely a sense that I was half in there, half out there compared to some of the other people who were there.
But I guess you had to, you were still committed, like you said, to completing the training. So you had to be all in that sense.
Yes. And then at the time, so yeah, exactly. At the time it came to qualify, so you interview in different departments you're interested in. So we had interviews. I wasn't able to secure a qualification post at Mayor Brown at the time. In fact, quite a lot of my intake weren't able to. I think it was because there weren't many jobs really overall in the market, and especially in the areas we wanted to go into. I didn't apply to finance because I knew that I didn't want those hours.
Right. So were those hours pretty standard, even once you were qualified?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think it almost gets worse, I would say.
Why do you think that is? Is that because of the size of the deals that people are working on?
I think it's partly because of the kind of the work. It's kind of transactional in those departments, corporate and finance. It's the clients you have who are demanding. And so because you're offering a service and because you're so expensive, legal fees are so expensive, people are expecting a certain kind of service. And that's part of it. I think another part of it is this kind of legend of like law firm hours.
Like banking.
That seems to have been formed, and that people seem to be shy to move away from.
I had to do it, so you should have to do it.
Yes, there's definitely that kind of there's definitely that kind of attitude. I don't necessarily feel it has to be like that, but I think it's very much in that culture. And so when people are applying to work in law firms or banks or whatever it is, these corporations, it's a kind of a given that this is that there'll be some of this happening, and you have to just grin and bear it, because if you're not going to take it, there'll be a queue of people ready to take your job for you.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely this kind of, because it's competitive and that combination, they can sort of do what they want. They can make you work in whichever way they want. And I remember my dad saying to me, once I went in on a Sunday morning, the deal was closing, and I went in on a Sunday morning, and I didn't leave the office until Monday evening. And my dad said to me, can't you just say no? And I said, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I think my dad really realized that in wanting to give his kids an office job, i.e. a job which was not manual labor, the way his had been, it wasn't quite as easy.
Yeah.
As a trainee, you say no to work or say no to, you're not going to last very long there, because they've got people who will say yes, lots of people.
So once you qualified and you didn't want to do finance, what did you?
I wanted to do finance, but I didn't want to go into that department. So I started looking for jobs which I thought would let me do finance but give me good hours. So I was looking for that kind of entry-level position somewhere, maybe something to do with like derivatives, which I'd looked at very briefly during my training contract, but nothing kind of crazy.
Can you just explain what derivatives is?
So derivatives are financial products. So it's a kind of, what's the easiest way to explain it? So say, for example, a derivative is something that gets its value, derives its value from an underlying object. So say the underlying object is a share, right? Yeah. So a share is worth whatever, £1. We think that share is going to be worth £2 in the future. The price of it's going to go up. So what we do is we lock into an option. The option is a derivative to buy that share for the price it is today, i.e. £1, but in the future for next year. So we just we've got like a kind of an idea. We think this is our risk we're taking. Yeah. So fast forward a year, and yes, you were right. Now that's worth £2. So you say, here's my option for which I paid a tiny premium.
Yeah.
I pay you £1. You give me the share. It's worth £2. I sell it on immediately and make 100% profit. Yeah. So I found a job which was working for a bank, Credit Suisse, and there was a company who was kind of working for Credit Suisse, in Credit Suisse, and what they were doing was looking at these very standardized contracts, which is basically what we use in derivatives. It's called an ISDA. So it's kind of like an industry standard contract, which then gets kind of tweaked depending on who the counterparty you're facing is. So Credit Suisse had a project to put all of those contracts into a system, and then the system would read these contracts and give the business snapshots of information based on those contracts without anybody having to read these boring legal documents. Yeah. So in order to create that system, there was a team of us, and that was my kind of like entry-level position into derivatives, looking at those contracts specifically, understanding them clause by clause, what it means, how they function. And I did that for a couple of years. It really set me up in terms of giving me that knowledge, but the hours were really good. You go in at 9, you leave at 6. It was like that.
Part-time compared to
absolutely
your first.
And you get
job.
very used to it again. Suddenly I was thinking, oh God, if I finish after 7, it's like, God, I've been here all night. So, you kind of, you do a change.
Sure.
You get used to different realities pretty quickly. Yeah, so I did that. And then I found a job working for an asset manager, which did a lot of derivatives trading and which had some space in their team. And I went there, and I went from sort of looking at these contracts to drafting those contracts for the company that I was working for. So more of a traditional legal, but this was on the buy side again. So we're working for an asset manager. So the hours are, of course, not the same as private practice. Yeah. People leave private practice to come to move in-house so that they can have nice hours.
Right.
So in that sense, I was sort of lucked out. I kind of just went from this kind of like entry-level position to like a more of a lawyering role. And I was there for 4 years.
Right.
And it was all during this time that my writing was really not doing, I just wasn't writing very much.
Yeah. Why do you think that was? Was it to do with availability of time, or was it just not something that was at the forefront of your mind?
So I think both. I think I didn't have the time, but I think because I I just didn't have the discipline that I used to have when I was very young and I was doing it for the first time. I was writing all the time when I was 16, writing. And then suddenly, I think my training contract sapped me of that kind of energy.
Yeah.
And so then suddenly, when I had this free time, I was kind of seeing my friends and I was doing things like that I couldn't do before. Like, I was...
Well, you were a young adult,
yes,
right? With
I was
money
very much
and
like
time.
Yes. So I think at that point in London, it was very much a kind of like, I became a socialite and I was doing all this kind of stuff. And writing was taking a backseat, and then I'd do a bit and then feel frustrated that I couldn't do anything more. There was a novel I was working on, but it was taking me a long time to sort of write it. And of course, on top of that, there was a lack of understanding as to what I was writing wasn't in fact very good. I didn't understand. I thought everything I wrote was great, but I didn't understand.
Were you, at that point, still in writing groups, or had you stepped away from that as well?
So then I started my own writing groups. So I formed quite a few.
Okay.
As a way of connecting with other writers, and that pushed me to write because then you would submit and you'd get people to feedback on those things whenever you met.
Right.
So I created a few writing groups. I found that some people I'm still in touch with, even after all these years, but I found that mostly the writing groups I formed at that point were with people who were at different stages in their sort of career. So most of us hadn't had anything big published, but some people were very sort of early stages, and so it was very difficult to gauge how to give feedback. Some people didn't want to hear the honest answers. Some people just wanted to hear "that's great," or just wanted to say "that's great, everything's great." So finding that kind of something that's useful to you as a writer, where somebody gives you positive but also actual useful critique of your work, that was tough.
And how did you like or not running a writing group? Because I can imagine with organising it and running it is also another level of responsibility that you don't have as an attendee, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't mind doing that, and even now in the writing groups I'm in at the moment, I'm part of 3 of them, and 2 of them I'm kind of the admin for.
Okay.
So I don't mind doing that at that time, especially because I was happy to do it because it meant that it would go the way I wanted, in the sense I could sort of be more in control of its formation. But it was always hard to find people, and then you meet people and somebody would be offended by somebody else's comments, and then you'd think you have to kind of moderate it. How should you, and everyone's got a different way of how they receive feedback, how they give feedback. So that was probably the biggest challenge at that time.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. How did you find people to join?
I think at the time I used to advertise on Gumtree,
right?
And we'd find people from there. Then also there used to be a website called My Cultural Life. This was many years ago now, and you could sign up to events. So it'd be all different events. It could be like a film or a gallery viewing or theatre, whatever it was. You signed up to what you want to do and meet people. And once the thing is over, you go for a drink in the nearest pub. And I think one of these was also like a writing thing. Right. So I kind of met people this way.
Did you have anybody that you worked with, any colleagues that joined?
No colleagues that joined.
Right.
But over time, I've met a lot of lawyers who do write.
Right.
And in fact, when I did my master's, I remember a lady who was meant to be on our course. One weekend, she was a law firm. She was in a Magic Circle law firm, so she was working for, I think, Linklaters, and she
had time to write.
Well, she applied for the masters, got onto the masters, and then 2 weeks into it, found that she couldn't do it. So she quit.
I was going to say.
So there was that reality as well.
Right. So you were 4 years at Credit Suisse.
2 years at Credit Suisse, and then 4 years at Insight.
Insight, the asset manager, yeah.
And then that was when I got very frustrated because my novel wasn't going anywhere, and I was kind of in this job which I didn't really. I mean, it was paying me well. My hours were good, but still, it was sort of lingering in my head longer than I wanted it to. And I realized that the reason that was happening was because I was a permanent employee. In order to go, when I was at Credit Suisse, I was working as a contractor. Right. So I had flexibility. I was earning good money. I had flexibility. I didn't have to do appraisals or any of that kind of stuff. Then suddenly I became a permanent employee. Appraisals became a thing. I had to kind of there was a certain sense of presenteeism there as well. At least I felt very bound to that job. Like I had to kind of be there. I couldn't say no to any form of like.
Right. So
any
when you say
form of work.
presenteeism, you mean even evening events and
Well, I think there was something. Sometimes it could be evening events,
you were
but
expected
sometimes
to be
it was
there.
just like everybody has to get here before this time in the morning. Everybody has to stay or show a certain, that kind of thing. It's not like that at the moment at all. But at that time, I think there was a bit of that, and so the things are what I attributed to those things was the fact that it was a kind of a permanent versus contractor, and I thought, well, why can't I become a contractor again? What's stopping me? I decided that if I want to finish this novel, I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to quit this permanent job, take a few months off, and then I'm going to go back and try and work as a contractor. So that was kind of like a pivot.
Right. So take a few months off and write.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I left that permanent job.
Right.
Yeah. So I travelled and also wrote, and then during the course
The
of
novel
that,
or something else, right?
Yes, I wrote that novel, my first ever written novel.
Yeah.
So I wrote it, and then I started looking for contracting opportunities. I wanted to go and work for a bank, which I hadn't done because I wanted a CV which would enable me to be seen as rounded.
Yeah.
So I'd worked on the buy side, and I wanted to go and work in a more of a negotiation capacity, but on the sell side, i.e. for the banks themselves. Got a job at Morgan Stanley. So I worked there, and that was very hardcore corporate, very...
even as a contractor?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And it was...
I mean, they're the top of their game, right? So...
Yes, but...
Not that I'm excusing it, but I can imagine there's an expectation.
Yeah. So I worked there, and it was very much like a not very nice, pleasant. For me, it wasn't suiting my personality in terms of what I wanted to do and what I felt was a good sort of like place to work. And so I started looking elsewhere, and then I got a job at Barclays. So I worked at Barclays for a year. And so what I would do is I'd work, and then I would say, okay, I'll do a year or a year and a half, and then I'll quit that job, and I'll take some time out, and because I've got some savings by then, and then I'm going to focus on my writing for a few months. So I started doing that. After Barclays, I went away and I wrote something more. Then I came back, and then I worked for a fintech. And again, I worked there as a contractor. It was a maternity cover. So I worked there. And then after my contract was over, they asked me to stay on, and they tried to really get me to stay. And I tried, and I stayed for 6 months extra.
Right.
But after 18 months, I was like, no, that's my limit. So I left that job. Then I spent 3 months in Barbados, where I was writing again.
And were you writing the same novel that
A different novel.
Right. Okay. So what happened to the first one? Did you finish that?
So I got to a stage where I sent it out to agents.
Yeah.
I was getting people asking me to see the full manuscript. So usually what happens in this country is, in the very traditional sense, you would send the first 3 chapters or 50 pages of your novel to an agent. They would read it. If they like it, they might call in the full manuscript.
Right.
Then they read it all. If they like it, they'll take you on. And then once they're happy that it's kind of saleable and good, then they will try and broker a deal with the publishing houses.
And so when they take you on, does that mean they then work with you on the novel?
Yes, exactly. So you sign
get
a
it
contract.
into a place where you're both happy, or they're happy with it.
Yeah, exactly.
To publish it, right?
Yeah, to push it to publishers.
Yeah.
So I got to a stage.
What do you mean by that? To push it to publishers?
Just to sell it. So the agent is the middleman.
Of course,
between between the publishing house and me.
So they get it to a point they're happy with it, and then they go to a publisher, and then
exactly. Yeah.
So you got interest from some agents?
So I sent it to a few agents. They said, send me the full manuscript, and then it was like a no, or I didn't hear from them. So it was that was happening, and then I thought, okay, I think it's time to learn a bit more, go on a different course. So I was looking up different courses that I could do. Curtis Brown Creative.
Okay.
So I saw that they were doing a 3-month novel writing course, and I thought, okay, this could be something. So in order to get a place on that course, you had to send in some words. For that purpose, I was like, I'm going to start a brand new novel. I'm not going to use my old one. I'm going to start something brand new and use this 3 months. If I get onto it, use the 3 months as a way of like finishing this novel. So I wrote the first bit of it, and I sent it off, and then I got a place in the course, and it was through that course that I made what is now one of my writing groups.
Okay.
Because we all met on that course. So we finished that course, and then I finished writing my novel.
Can I just ask, how did that course, how was it run? What was your experience?
It was, I thought it was really good. So basically everybody had an idea for a novel and they'd written some of it. Not all of it, but some of it. We would meet every week, face to face, and then two people's work would be sort of like workshopped. So it'd start by talking about like other writers and talking about dialogue or characterization or some other form of writing. Our tutor was the writer Charlotte Mendelssohn, and she was amazing, and she was sort of took us through various things. So we look at how writing works generally, and then we try some exercises ourselves. And then in the second half of that, we'd look at other people's work, and we would all provide feedback, what we liked, what we didn't like. And then that would kind of lead to a broader discussion about, how to make our work better. So yeah, we did that course. Then after that course finished, Curtis Brown launched a first novel award. So it was like it was their way of looking for new talent. Yeah. They launched this. I sent off the first 3,000 words or whatever it was into that competition. And then it was longlisted for that prize. As a result of it being longlisted, an agent from there, Gordon Wise, contacted me, and he said, "Oh, I really liked it. Have you got anything more to share?" I said, "I haven't got anything more to share. I'll send it to you when it's ready." And then a year passed after I was like getting it workshopped in my writing group. I was having people read it. I was kind of making it better, so on and so forth. Then I approached him and a few other agents. Agents take a long time to get back to you, and that's the reality. So I waited about 8 weeks, and then I had interest from some two agents. They were interested in reading the full manuscript, and when someone asks for the full manuscript, you can tell the others that somebody's requested it. In my opinion, the way the whole agent thing works is that everyone's after the next big thing. Yeah. So if they think someone else likes you, then they're also interested suddenly. So, it's very much a kind of a game one has to play. And so once I became a bit mindful of that, then I saw that this is what's happening. So then somebody was requesting it. So I then said to my now agent, I said, I've had some requests for the full manuscript. And he said, "Oh, hold your horses. I haven't finished it yet. Can you just give me a bit of time?"
Right.
So I was like, well, let's see. And then he messaged me that weekend. He must have read it. And on Saturday night at midnight, he sent me a message gushing about how much he loved it and how he wanted to have a chat with me. So we arranged a Zoom. This is during COVID.
Yeah.
So now we're into COVID, and now we're kind of like...
Are you still working at this point?
Yeah. Working all the way through COVID. Yeah. But the writing was very much there as well. Well, so we had a Zoom call, and he pitched himself very well. And I felt like he understood the novel.
That must have been an interesting position to find yourself in. All of a sudden, you've got an agent that you've been desperate to sign with, pitching themselves to you. That's
your aim. There's definitely a point in your journey when you think, if I can just get the agent, everything else will work out.
But then I guess you realise at that point, once you've got an agent coming to you, they're like, hold on a minute, are they the right agent?
Well, there's definitely that, because you have to think, what is the agent saying to me? What are they, how have they perceived my novel? Are they in a big agency, a small agency? Are they more hands-on? Are they not really?
It's like the next step in the journey, right?
Yeah.
You're like, hold on a minute, no, I don't want any agent now.
But he's also a very established agent,
right.
And he was obviously working for Curtis Brown, which is the biggest agency.
So is this the guy you mentioned before?
Yes, Gordon Wise,
yeah.
I mean, I just thought, well, it's Curtis Brown. How can I say no, really? And he seemed very eager. So then I said, okay. So then I went with Curtis Brown. We had some discussions about the novel. Then he came up with some feedback on the novel. It wasn't actually very much at all, but it was like one round we did of edits. And then he said, okay, I think this is fine. This is going to be an easy sell. Let's have a go. So he sent it to many editors, publishing houses. It was rejected by all of them for all different reasons, sometimes not very useful. It wasn't very easy for us to decipher what it was that they were saying. Right. One editor agreed to have a chat with us, and she suggested some ideas. And she said, I'm happy to read it again if you put these changes in. So then I went away and put those changes in. At that point, then my agent, I showed it to him. He showed it to the editorial assistant who works within their team, and they felt that it wasn't working, that I'd somehow overworked it. So they weren't happy with that. So then I was kind of a bit stuck. And it was quite frustrating at that point. I'd spent all this time on it.
Yeah.
And suddenly it wasn't really working.
And you need them to send it to the editor, right?
So there was that hurt. You have to get through quite a few hurdles.
They're the gatekeeper, of that relationship.
So then I said, okay, well, then what can we do? So I tried to push for more engagement. I suppose I said, well, what if I send you small sections and then you can tell me if it's working, so we can do it together rather than me just go away, do it all, and then it does not work. So we agreed that kind of compromise. I'm also working on short stories. After a while, the novel can get a bit intense. Sometimes you just need a breather.
Right.
And so the way I get that breather is by writing a short story.
Right.
It gives you more of a kind of a quick high, and then you can sort of go back into your novel. And so I was writing short stories. At that point, one of my short stories had been up for this Gally Beggar Short Story Prize, which was like pretty good. So there was stuff happening. I could see my writing was getting better and it was getting a bit more recognition. I was still waiting for Gordon to come back to me. And then I did another course. And this course was a 6-month course for writing a short story. Well, it wasn't designed for short stories necessarily. It could be anything. But it was run by The Stinging Fly, which is like a literary magazine that's run from Ireland, really kind of an established one. They publish a lot of amazing Irish writers. They kind of discovered Sally Rooney, for example.
Right. Wow.
So I applied for a course there and I got onto the course, and that was a 6-month course. And over the course of those 6 months, I wrote a short story collection, or rather I wrote 2/3 of a short story collection. Those were workshopped in the same way that I had workshopped my work at Curtis Brown on the novel. So I had a short story collection. Then one of these short stories I sent off for the BBC National Short Story Prize. And then lo and behold, I got a call. I was on holiday and I got a call from them saying, oh, we loved your short story. We'd like to shortlist it for the prize.
Wow, amazing.
And so I was like, that really blew my mind, because I didn't really, it's the kind of prize that everybody, I think, would love to like get shortlisted for, but no one ever thinks they will. So when that happened, I was really like over the moon. It was announced on whichever day it was. And then in the morning, he then sent my short story collection. But this time there were no amendments to that collection. There were no changes. He sent that to, I think about maybe 15, 20 editors. He said, here's a link to the interview he did on the BBC. Here's a short story. You might have heard of this, because it's kind of everyone's radar. Here's a collection, and then he's also got a novel. If you want to call it in the literary world in the UK, short stories are a great thing to write, and I love writing them. I think they're amazing. But the publishing landscape in this country is very much geared towards novels. So if you approach someone with a short story collection, they're going to ask you, have you got a novel? Yeah. I was being interviewed by the BBC, and I was distracted for that week. So I was thankful for the distraction, because otherwise you're kind of ruminating. Is it going to go anywhere? Whatever. Then he called me a week later and he said, I just had a call from Faber, and Faber are saying that they loved both. They've read the novel, they've read the short stories. They want to offer on both of them.
Wow.
But
amazing.
But it's what's known as a preempt. So what they say is, we're offering a certain amount of money, but on the premise that you take it off the table. So you have 24 hours. We had until the end of the day to say yes or no to the offer. Otherwise, if it goes into more of like a bidding scenario, then they might lower their price at that stage.
Right.
Lower their offer, rather. Without the book even being signed or published, they're basically saying, we're kind of aligning ourselves to you, and we're taking a punt on you. So, I mean, because it's Faber, I didn't even imagine that Faber would publish my book. But I was, of course, super excited by the prospect of that. And I said to Gordon, well, this is great. Why don't we just say yes? And he said, well, let's hold your horses. Let's do a little round robin and find out what all the other editors are saying. Yeah. And we can tell them that we've got this situation.
Because I was going to say that, because isn't the dilemma like, okay, if Faber want it and they want us to take it off the shelf, off of what I can't remember the term you used. Preempt it. Maybe someone else will pay me more or give me a better deal. So there's that's what I mean about the dilemma. You're like... Yes,
exactly. So there was that dilemma. So he emailed around, and I think a lot of people said, we love the short stories. We haven't read the novel. We want more time.
Right. Okay.
Of course, we didn't have much more time. Yeah. And so then we had to really think. We had to say, well, are these other publishers really, is it worth giving them more time? Or have they already had their chance and they've just missed it? And more than money, are they going to publish it properly? Then I spoke to my editor at Faber. because I'd not met her before. I didn't know who she was. We spoke and she was really enthusiastic about it. And I was like, okay, she's seen something. Like somebody has seen my work, has read my work and is really enthusiastic about it. And like, what more do I want? This is literally what my dream. So I was very happy to go with Faber. So then by the end of the day, we decided that we were gonna do that. And so we said no to the other people. And then a few months later, because it takes a long time to sign the contract and everything, that all happened. So my agent's negotiating everything and then I sign it. And then around that time, it was my latest stint of like contracting came to an end. Well, or I decided to end it after 18 months again. So this time I'd gone back to where I started at Insight.
Right.
So I'd gone back to Insight and then I said, okay, I've done 18 months. I'm going to like leave now. And so I went and then I spent 3 months in Mexico at the beginning of this year, where I went through the editing process on this novel with my Faber editor. So I went through that and then it was delivered, i.e. all the edits were put in. I went back to her and then I came back and started working again as a lawyer.
Right. And were you editing the novel?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, it was based on her feedback.
Yeah.
So then we went through the kind of editing process.
How was that for you? Was that intense or?
It was. I mean, I worked really hard on it. I feel like it was intense, but because I had the time, because I didn't have anything else crowding, there was no legal career at that time to like crowd my mind. I could do it. I could engage with it properly. A lot of it was to do with research, in fact, because the novel, one of the main streams of the novel is to do with the asylum process in the UK.
Right.
So when I first started writing that novel, the asylum process was a bit different.
Right.
And then, of course, it changes. And even now it's changing, like literally at the moment. So there was that kind of, I had to kind of be mindful of what those changes were and how they impact the story and how it impacts my character. So I had to go back and look into that, to speak to some specialists and understand, like, well, how are the delays impacting people? Like, what kind of delays are we talking? Like, it's years from making an application to hearing the outcome of that. And then kind of introducing that into the novel, but not in a kind of intrusive way. Like the changes were small, but they were significant. So that was what that editing process was more about. That my editor, she's very much retained my voice.
Right.
She's not trying to change me as a writer. Her focus has been on making everything plausible within the novel.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you found the right home for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Amazing.
I feel really lucky.
Yeah.
So then so that happened. And so now it's kind of been through a copy editing process, is proofing, and so now the novel is more or less done. And now it's kind of we're in the stage where it's marketing and publicity, proofs are being sent out to various people, influencers, other writers, and we're getting blurbs back and people are reading it and engaging with it. This comes out on the 29th of January next year.
Right. And at what stage, I'm just curious to know, does the artwork for the cover get agreed? Is that what you're going through now?
That's done. The cover was finalised about a couple of months ago, I'd say now.
So what's the process for that decision making?
So they have a team of designers who get a brief of the novel. If they want to read anything more, they can read it, and then based on that, they do the design. As a writer, you don't really get a say.
You don't. So you're not
really. I mean,
a decision maker in that sense. Oh, okay.
Not really.
And how did you feel when you saw the artwork? It must be like, wow, that's my book.
So I have the UK, the UK and the Commonwealth deal, which is Faber.
Right.
Then there was also a US deal that we did separately, and that's with a different publishing house, with the HarperCollins.
Right. Okay.
So they have their own
another great name.
They have their own design team and their own market. So I've got two different covers, very different covers. Right. Sometimes they ask you for your input on something, this color, that color, this writing or this font. With the Faber one, it was kind of just presented as like, here are not even two options necessarily. Here's the cover, and this one had like one color and one had a different color. What do you prefer? Sort of like that. So, I mean, given that I had no say in it, I was really happy with them.
Yeah. And considering this is something that you've wanted to do for such a long time, when did you realize it was happening?
I think there were 2 points. I think when I received a proof of my book.
Yeah. Must have been amazing.
Like,
I'm excited. You can hear it in my voice. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I think seeing a proof on my bookshelf, I could just put like next to other books.
Amazing.
That And then also then they had like an announcement in the bookseller where it was sort of talking about like what they'd acquired, how the acquisition and what they thought of the book and so on. And that was a bit of a pinchy moment. Seeing my face like on this on this thing. Yeah. I think those two were real moments.
And your parents, are they excited for you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because my parents they've always sort of just known that it's important to me and that I have always written. I don't think they ever thought of it as something more than a hobby because it's so removed from their own lives, really. But you know, when I was really young and I used to go to these courses in Leicester, or the Adult Education College, they're the ones who drove me there every evening and picked me up. Yeah. So you know that kind of practical love. Practical support, which is very much a thing of Asian parents, was very much there. But yeah, I think they're very excited now to see it. Like now that it's an actual book, and I think also now that there's some money attached to it, because I think for them it comes down to security.
Sure.
And I think that's almost a bit of a difference between them and me, their life and my life.
Yeah.
Security.
Well, I guess you've got security, but also for you, it's your passion is the writing, right?
Yes. Yeah. But now if I want to actually not be a lawyer, then I have to think about money. I have to think about how will I survive. Now the question is, well, what other things can I do with my writing that will give me money?
I do have a question for you, though, before we go on to that. When you first started talking, you mentioned the writing group that you went to, that there was someone in particular that is still your mentor.
Yes.
So who's that?
So her name is Bede Roberts. So she's an amazing short story writer, and she published loads of short stories in like women's magazines and things like that. She was very like prolific. But I met her when she taught me on a short story writing course, and she would always just be there, and she would say to me, "Oh, your writing is like a box of chocolates. You know, you have a couple and then you get really full. You can't eat the whole pack." And now I understand what she said, what that meant. Okay. And I think my writing has now actually become the opposite of what it was. Like it used to be very sort of like descriptive and now I use description very sparingly. Now it's more about people and movement. Right. Not always plot, but sort of movement of the piece. So she was very instrumental, and she's the kind of person who tells you how it is. If you ask her opinion on a story, she'll say, "Oh, I don't think this is very good," or whatever, and that's her opinion. And I think it's really helpful to have someone like that who you can trust and who can say that to. So over time, when I was working in a permanent job as a lawyer, she said I was frustrated, and I said to her, "Oh, I'm really would love to just be a writer, but I'm just not writing enough, and I'm just getting really frustrated." But I was whinging to her about my predicament, and she said to me, "Oh, I think I've got the answer for you. I want you to write 500 words every day, just 500. Stop. If you can't write anything more than that. If you want to write more than 500, put them onto a different sheet of paper. Just 500 every day." And she goes, "You used to be somebody who used to just write. You used to come to me and used to come to those weekly things and used to just write. And you weren't concerned about being a writer. You were just writing. Now you're coming to me and you're saying you want to be a writer, but in fact you're not writing. How is it that you're saying you want to be a writer? You're saying you want it as a career. Yet it's so easy for you to say no to writing compared to, should we go for dinner? Should we go to a club? Should we go to a bar? Any form of social thing, you're saying yes to those things all the time. But when it comes to writing, you're saying no. If you want it to be your job, make it your job."
And how did you feel when she said that?
Well, that was my...
The light bulb moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was my kind of like, I would say, like sliding doors moment. Right. Because it made me realize that actually what she was saying was totally true. Yeah. I had become somebody who wanted to be a writer, but who was not writing. Yeah. And how was that going to be possible? So then I did what she said, and I started writing 500 words, and I would stop and I would do it. I did that for a few weeks. And I just kept going. And that was that was a long time ago now, 8-9 years ago. So then I started doing that. And then I would say since that conversation, I have pretty much written most days. But I think if you want to build a career as a writer, or even if you want to write a book, write a novel, you have to produce the words. There's no getting around it. I mean, like you have to produce 100,000 words, right? How people do it without discipline, I don't know if that's even possible.
It's been fascinating hearing your story, and I think what's really struck me is that I've been thinking about how when I've been talking to people about the creative moves they've made in their career, that there's been a catalyst that's taking them from one job to another. And you're the first person that I've spoken to where that isn't the case. And actually you're sort of in the motions of making the change that you want to happen, but you've actually done it in conjunction with your first career.
I'm definitely a believer in the long game, and I think writing is a long game.
Yeah.
I think writing is, in particular, is full of rejection.
Yeah.
And I think one has to become very resilient to that.
Yeah.
But I think if people are expecting a quick win, it's unlikely to happen because I think it doesn't, because even things which appear as overnight successes are not.
Damn you, I was about to say that.
Were you?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm learning the sitar.
Right.
And I've been learning for about 10 years. And the reason I'm so bad at it, and the reason I haven't got nowhere near as good as my writing, for example, is because I just haven't put the hard work in.
Yeah.
Like I attend my lessons, fine, I do a bit of practice every now and again. But really, to become really good at it, you have to really just...
You have to apply yourself.
You have to really apply yourself. And that's something that I would love to do with it, because I feel like I can see glaringly, obviously, the difference between these two things and what's stopping me becoming really good in something else.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we've got two questions that we ask everyone, and you've obviously answered the second one, which is a sliding door moment, and that's a great answer. What's a decision you would have made differently if you could go back in time and change the outcome?
That's a trickier one. I feel like I really enjoyed studying law. See, one of the things I could answer would be that I didn't become a lawyer, and in fact spent all those years where I studied to be a lawyer, trained to be a lawyer, in fact just being a writer. But I don't think I would do that. I think it's given me a lot of financial freedom. Being a lawyer, it's given me some mental release.
But also you had the expectation from your family to do something.
So I fulfilled that, I suppose. But I think what I would change is becoming a contractor sooner, or sticking to contracting and never actually going and becoming permanent.
Right.
Understanding that the field I was in worked for contractors, many people work that way, and that actually if I had done that and given myself a bit more flexibility earlier on, would I have got to this place sooner? I mean, I say all this is theoretical. Yeah. In reality, I don't really believe in regrets. Yeah. I think as you go through your life, you only make the decision you could have made at that time, based on your life, based on your thoughts, your experiences. I think it's a bit of a fiction to say that there could have been some other life that you could have led. There's no such thing as a bad decision. There is just the decision you make, which is the only decision you could have made, and then you live with that decision.
It's a very personal question and a reality, but I absolutely understand and hear what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, I would say, give myself more flexibility earlier on. That would be my advice to myself. Yeah.
Well, listen, Manish, thank you so much for coming in. It's been really interesting meeting you and hearing your story. And are you able to tell us what your book's called?
Yeah, it's called Belgrave Road.
Belgrave Road. Okay, great. We'll look out for it. 29th of January, 2026.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Creative Moves, Left Career, Right Path, a Cabbage and Bubble TV co-production. Host, Kabir Malik. Producers, Pauline Russell and Kabir Malik. Special thanks to Manish Chauhan. Follow us on Instagram at Creative Moves. Subscribe to Creative Moves on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, or wherever you get your podcasts.